Hi, my name is Rebecca Morris, and my presentation on effective instruction in the classroom is focused on English. First thing I'd like you to do is take out a sticky note and write down a couple of ways that you engage your students. Once you've done that, why don't you turn to a peer and talk about what they do to engage their students and what you do to engage yours. You might find some similarities and you might learn something new. One of the ways that I engage my students is through bell work. When they come into the classroom, they've got something already set for them to do. Another way I do engagement is through questioning. One of the things I learned from one of my peers in our grade level meetings was questioning through calling on students rather than asking a question and then having students raise their hands. She has a policy of hands are for questions, and I thought that that was really, really helpful. Another way that I engage students is through my stamp sheet. At the end of a class period, I look for a specific skill that they've been practicing, and they have a handout that they get a stamp on if they've achieved the set goal. They have through the end of the week in order to achieve that. Building a democracy is one of my bell work setups that we do at the beginning of a unit, where I give them a quotation that they're expected to write down. This one is a nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share the responsibility for upholding the common good. And that's a whole lot to hold on to as a 17-year-old at the beginning of a class period. So after they've copied it, then we go through what each of these sections might mean. The next thing I do is I have them describe the image. There's an image tied to each one of our units, and those themes connect not only with the quotation in the title, but also ongoing throughout the unit. So after I've had them copy it and ask them what their first impression of the image is, we have a group discussion about the commonalities between the title, the quote, and the image. And this is an extenuated bell work that leads them into the beginning of the unit and the class discussion throughout. Hart says that rigorous teaching and learning has a framework, and there's a couple of listings that she uses there. So all students can learn. High expectations will keep them living up to that and working for those expectations. Collaborative planning. So as a teacher, collaboration is imperative. I collaborate with my other 11th grade English teacher, and we do essentially the same thing every class period. We have the same expectations and goals for our students, and we share our struggles and our successes. Evidence of learning. One of the things that we do is progress monitoring in my school. So at the beginning of a quarter or the beginning of the year, we give them a general assessment on their reading, writing, their reading and the writing skills. And then we test them again at the end of each quarter and see where they are with their progress in each one of those tasks and standards. Critical thinking, questioning and evaluating, constantly questioning students and keeping them focused on the overall goal. And then the last one that Hart brings up is positive class and school culture. One of the ways that I do that through at the beginning of the school year is I take a silent survey with students and I have them give me a list of things that they do or don't have experience in. For example, one of them is after school activities if they're involved in that. And then I do a listing of those things. Hart also mentions 5 key indicators that contribute to effective instruction that I found very interesting. And we can go through them. So as the teacher, from my perspective, one of the things that she says that we do is communicates with clarity. I take notice of when I'm having moments that I'm not being clear with students and ask them when I'm asking certain questions or what it is that we're working on in the lesson. And then I try to clarify in the moment and make a connection with them so that they understand. I engage them with pictures and connections and images. We use videos. Last year, at the end of the year, we did Mean Girls, an excerpt from Mean Girls to talk about group crowd mentality and how people kind of go with the crowd. Facilitates discussion. I see myself more as a facilitator in the classroom rather than somebody who's just spouting off information for students to write down, because I want them to be tired and do the work at the end of the day. The other thing that we do is provide feedback. I provide feedback with their stamp sheets as I'm going through at the end of the class period and talk about what it is that they need to work on, if it's citation or completing their sentences. If they regularly have issues with comma placement, then we talk about that. But I take a moment at the end of each class period and I talk with each student. And then it uses a variety of grouping structures. I try to use the Kagan mentality with grouping structures. So students are placed in groups of no more than 4. I try to put 2 guys and 2 girls in each group based on ability level, with a high achieving student, a middle high achieving student, a middle low achieving student, and a lower student, so that they can kind of pair off and learn from each other. I do try to change their groups every 4 to 6 weeks. So about the time they change their stamp sheet, which is also changed every 4 to 6 weeks. So specifically, I communicate with students on their goal. I have our learning goal on the board and also the group of skills that we've got in my classroom. So there's 3 different sets of skills that they work on: knowledge and integration of knowledge and ideas, detail, and structure. And I identify those as we're working through the lesson and how it relates to them, how it relates to their standardized test scores and their goals of getting into college. Okay, engagement. I already talked about bell work and how I engage students with bell work and connecting to previous information. If it's something new, I try to make a connection with their U.S. history class, because American history in 11th grade ties very nicely with what's happening in their history class and helping them prepare for their APUSH exam, or just the regular history class as well. And I facilitate discussions. We do think pair shares in my classroom, as well as the Kagan grouping, so that they can get more comfortable talking with groups before talking to a crowd, because sometimes that's really intimidating for a student, and even as an adult it's intimidating to talk to a whole group of people that you don't know personally. Wait time for students to answer. I use a timer in my classroom to be sure that I'm allowing them enough time to think through questions and think through whatever it is that we're talking about, and then time to share as well before bringing it back to the whole group. Providing feedback. Marzano says this is how any professional improves, in every profession, from the medical field to the educational field. So having a quick turnaround with feedback on student writing is imperative, so that they have an immediate understanding of what they did well and what they need to improve on, and then a continued practice for how to improve that. I also try to incorporate peer feedback, where students get a chance to use checklists and look at their partner's work, or somebody who's sitting close to them, or within their groups of 4, trading off and looking at specific things like text evidence. I'll have them highlight the text evidence in their peers' work. If they're missing citation, then I have them point that out, and a listing that goes along with that to help better their writing. Grouping structures. Like I previously said, I do a think, pair, share, so they'll think through something and jot down some ideas before they turn to a partner or a group and share their ideas. I'll have them record down what it is that their peers say and try to make a connection between what their peer has written and what they've got down as well. Kagan groups I do, and I also place them on ability level, but not always on ability level, because that becomes challenging with 11th grade English. Some of my general classes are all lower level learners, or my honors classes have a lot of higher level learners, so grouping them by ability sometimes excludes a few of the students, and it doesn't really work out for my dynamic. Strategies to improve instruction. Some of the strategies listed in the Dean et al. Text is cue questioning and advanced organizers, non-linguistic representations, summarizing and note-taking, assigning homework and providing practice, identifying similarities and differences, And lastly, generating and testing hypothesis. Use questions and advanced organizers, inferential questions. So teachers can help students make inferences about things, people, actions, events, or states of being. I help students through making connections on the image that I had before and asking them where they may have seen something like that, where they have a bunch of hands together, and identifying the different cultures or races that image portrays and what they happen to be doing together. In that instance, they happen to be all holding up a flagpole and what that might represent. There's also analytical questions where students are breaking apart information and identifying errors, constructing support, and analyzing perspective, so where the author might be coming from. And within that unit, we have a story called Mother Tongue, written by Tan, and she is writing from the perspective of an immigrant's child growing up in America and what that's like, and learning to speak Chinese at home and then speaking English in the school system and then out in the world. Non-linguistic representation, so using images like this and talking to students about what it is that they see and connections to where they might have seen things like this before. Summarizing and note-taking. I talk a lot about summarizing versus paraphrasing with my students and what that difference is. We do a lot of paraphrasing with more dense pieces so that they can learn how to break things apart by themselves when I'm not there to help them decode information. Summarizing is another thing that we do at the bottom of our Cornell notes. We have guided questions that I use with them on really dense readings that help them focus on specific things. Most recently, we've been looking at the structure of a text and why the author might be putting things that they're placing in certain order. So Dean et al. Says summarizing is the process of distilling information down to its most salient point to aid in understanding, memorizing, and learning the relevant material. So at the end of it, they're able to look back at the summary and why the author might be structuring a text a specific way if that's what we're focusing on. Homework and providing practice. Review and reinforces practice skills. Students suggest a small but positive relationship between the portion of homework that students complete and their achievement levels. So ultimately, homework is good for them. And in my class, I have students not make up work, but if they don't finish a task, I'm able to give them that for homework. And by the end of the week, all the assignments are due. And inevitably, what we're working on is a task that's repeated throughout the piece that they work on in class. So by the time they get to the end of it, if they do have to finish it for homework, they have that added practice of the same skill. Identifying similarities and differences. We use Venn diagrams, or I'll use pieces like the image, quote, and title of the collection so that they can build connections between those things. Clarifying, you can use charts for clarifying information. Students practice categorizing vocabulary words and tone words. Creating metaphors so that they understand that one thing is similar to another, or using different analogies. So if this is like this, then that must be like that. Generating and testing hypothesis, giving students an opportunity to create an prediction, an idea about what a text might be saying, and then how that connection might relate to previous texts that we've looked at in our class or in another class. Helping students extend and apply the knowledge that they've learned. So identifying similarities and differences helps learning gains insight, draw inferences, and make generalizations and develop or reframe refined schemas. So giving students an opportunity to make those connections between Tan's piece that I mentioned earlier of Mother Tongue to the Declaration of Independence and what it is to be free and have free speech as one of the amendments that we talk about. And then further connecting that back to the title that we had of the collection of Building a Democracy and the quotation as well as the image. Helping students extend and apply that knowledge, so generating and testing a hypothesis, giving them an opportunity to do that. Deductions, so they'll deduct or deduce and induce information. So deduction, connecting prior knowledge to current information. I give them that opportunity through bell work and discussion. With my example, specifically, they'll tie the building of democracy back to their history class. Induction, making inferences based on knowledge that students already have or information that is presented to them. I see that more organically with my students that I have later in the class, later in the day, because they've already had their history class, so they'll make connections more easily than my prior classes that probably take my information later to their history class. Reflection is really huge, so that you have a moment to think back on what it is that you understood or what you needed to improve on. I give my students an opportunity on Fridays to look back at the things that they've done throughout the week and what they found challenging, what they found easy, and also make a goal for how they can improve on their skills. So what can you take away from this presentation and use in your classroom that is more effective? My references.